Hi, Max here with FrizWoods, and today I'll be answering two very common questions I get about disciplining children here in Maryland. The first question we're going to discuss is, may I legally spank or discipline my child? And the second question is, what kind of crimes or criminal offenses could I be charged with if I do spank my child here in Maryland? Let's jump right into it. First and foremost, may a parent use physical force to discipline their child here in Maryland? And the answer to that question is yes. There is a widely accepted parental discipline exception to many of the criminal offenses here in Maryland. However, it is a defense to a criminal offense. So it most often becomes an issue when a person is charged. Can you be charged for spanking your child or otherwise inflicting discipline? Yes. Is it also an absolute defense that you were disciplining your child? Probably or perhaps. And there are a few factors that we'll talk about that are considered by a fact finder when deciding if the parental discipline or caretaker discipline inflicted upon a child was legally protected or unwarranted and constitutes a criminal offense. Let's talk about that second question that I receive very often. What kind of criminal liability could I have for inflicting disciplinary, physical discipline upon a child of mine or a child that I'm watching? There are three major offenses that I most often see in child abuse and assault cases involving children. First and foremost, let's talk about the misdemeanor that's often charged, and that's second-degree assault. In Maryland, there are a lot of different ways to prove a second-degree assault, but most commonly, if you're talking about spanking somebody, you're talking about a battery, an unconsented to touching. Second-degree assault in Maryland requires a state prove beyond a reasonable doubt, an unconsented to touching, and a spanking is most assuredly unconsented to because the child is usually being disciplined. And that's where the parental discipline exception comes into play. This is an instruction that a jury would receive during the decision-making process, essentially when rendering their verdict. A parent may use reasonable physical force to discipline a child. However, they may not engage in a gratuitous attack or use physical force to simply inflict pain upon the child. In addition, they may not use cruel or inhumane physical force. In determining whether physical force is reasonable, a jury would look at all the surrounding circumstances, like the age, the physical condition of the child, the mental condition of the child, the behavior that actually led to the discipline, as well as the impact or injury on the child resulting from the force. So what that boils down to is, if you are spanking your child, it needs to be something that's done as simply to discipline, and it must be considered reasonable. So it can't be done just to hurt them. A fact finder would consider how old your child is, what their mental state is, what they did to lead to the spanking, and then what kind of impact it left. What other criminal offenses do I often see in cases involving child discipline? It's child abuse. Child abuse in Maryland comes in two different degrees, and the elements are largely the same with the exception of the degree to which the child is injured. Both counts are felonies. For a first-degree child abuse, for example, a defendant must cause a serious physical injury. Serious physical injury means brain injury or bleeding in the skull, starvation, physical injury that creates a substantial risk of death, or causes permanent or protracted serious disfigurement, or the loss of function of any body member, organ, or impairment of any body member or organ. So when we're talking about what kind of injuries you would see to a child involved in a child abuse case in the first degree, we're talking about serious, long-lasting physical injuries along the lines of burns and broken bones. Second-degree child abuse doesn't require that severe physical injury. Rather, it just requires an injury. So a bruise, which is what you might have caused a child if you were disciplining them, let's say, for example, with a belt or a flip-flop, or even just your hand. A bruise might be the physical injury required, not a severe, but the physical injury required for you to be charged with a second-degree child abuse, which is also a felony. Now, again, the same parental discipline exception that I explained before about second-degree assault also applies to first and second-degree child abuse, although more likely than not, if you're charged with a first-degree child abuse and the facts are sufficient to show a serious physical injury, the reasonableness of that physical force probably going to come down against you here, because one of the things that the jury or the fact finder is going to consider is the impact or injury to the child. If your child, let's say, breaks a plate in the kitchen and you break their arm, that's going to be unreasonable. However, if you're a parent of 2 children and one child pushes the other down the stairs, causing a broken leg to your other child, if you spank your first child, perhaps that and resulting in a bruise, perhaps that second-degree child abuse and second-degree assault charge that you might be facing could be entirely defended based upon that reasonable physical force to respond to what is obviously a very serious act that led to the use of force, right? Pushing another child down the stairs. So, in summary, if you are watching this video wondering, can I spank my child? Can I discipline my child with physical force here in Maryland? The answer is you can. However, you can also be charged with a criminal offense. So therefore, when and if you are ever going to discipline your child and use physical force, I would strongly advise you against doing so and trying other methods to parent your child, because there is no legal right necessarily to discipline your child with physical force. There is instead an affirmative defense to criminal charges. So if you're at the point where you're already charged, that's when the defense comes into play. So I would, again, caution all parents against using physical force against their children, but from a legal standpoint, there is a recognized parental discipline exception to all of our different forms of assault and child abuse here in Maryland. If you have a case and your case involves a parental discipline exception and you want to speak with an attorney here in Maryland, give our firm a call. We'll be happy to discuss with you in a confidential attorney-client privilege consultation some of the facts of your case and how a parental discipline exception might apply. Thanks.